I think Zoo Med Laboratories is probably one of the most recognizable brands in herpetoculture. They've been around since 1977, and in 1993 were the first brand to actually produce UVB lamps specifically for reptiles. Later on in this episode, we're going to learn more about a Zoo Med product that is specifically designed for bearded dragons. So if you own a bearded dragon or you want to in the future, you will not want to miss this. This podcast is all about improving your reptile husbandry. However, I know not everybody has the time or the money to go out and spend thousands of dollars doing custom builds. Thankfully, friend of the podcast, Josh Halter, aka the Bio Dude, is working hard to make better care more accessible. He makes turnkey bioactive kits for leopard geckos, ball pythons, tortoises, invertebrates, dart frogs, and the list continues to grow. He has spent years testing and perfecting these handcrafted substrates and dietary supplements to create the most effective products. If you visit thebiodude.com, you will see he is a proud supporter of both USARK and responsible reptile keeping, and there is an option to donate to either at checkout. Welcome back to the Animals at Home podcast. My name is Dylan Perrin, and thank you so much for tuning in today. We are doing another round table in this episode. It's actually round table number 8, and I'm super excited about this episode. We're speaking with Stefan, Flo, Till, and Ben of the European Herpetoculture Podcast. You may not have stumbled across this podcast yet, as it is brand new. They have, I think, 2 episodes up until recording this right now, and I'm just so excited to have these guys on. They are bringing... Well, essentially, this episode, we really discuss what they're planning on doing with the podcast. I think for many of us who are in North America, we sometimes put the European keepers on a pedestal, and in many ways, they're a mysterious bunch who have, as far as we're concerned, very high care standards. Now, of course, that's not always true, and we do discuss that a little bit in this episode. But in the podcast in general, we talk about their plans with the show, what their goals are, the type of episodes that are going to be recording. We dive into a little bit about each of them, although each of them have been on Project Herpetoculture or my podcast at some point in the past. So those are the episodes you're going to want to go to get a full background on our guest today. But we also discuss those main differences between American, which I include Canada in that, versus European herpetoculture practices. There is very potent differences, and there's also lots of similarities, and we have a great conversation about how those what those differences mean for our practice of keeping reptiles. I don't think I need to say anything further. You will enjoy this episode. I will catch you at the end of it. Welcome to the show, everyone. We have Ben, Till, Flo, and Stefan on the podcast today. A big round table. Actually, it's just an exciting podcast in general because of a lot of the topics we're going to discuss, and the project that you guys are working on right now that as of listening to this has already launched, so I can't wait to talk about that more. But first, I just want a big warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So why don't we just quickly go around the table and just a brief introduction. All of you have been on either project. I think all of you have been on Project Herpetoculture, and Stefan obviously has been on my show as well. So if anybody wants a real detailed background of any of you, they will go back to those episodes. But maybe just quick intro, where you live and kind of what you keep and how long you've been keeping type thing. Why don't we start with Stefan, and then we'll work our way around.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Stefan. I live in the Netherlands, in the beautiful town of Groningen, for those who want to try to pronounce that. I've been keeping reptiles for longer than I can remember almost, and I currently work with a lot of Asian turtles and also some semi-aquatic lizards. I really like the combo of water, tropical plants, and the animals. And yeah, that's about me. My collection is still a little bit changing. I'm still figuring out what it's exactly going to be. That's an ever-evolving project, and I know where I want to go, and it's very frustrating. I'm not there yet, so we're working on that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you'll probably never be there, and you'll probably never feel like you're there. And also, can you quickly mention the YouTube channel?
Pardon? Sorry, Liam. Fuck you, Liam. No. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I'm also the host of the Terrarium channel. Doing that for a bit more than 4 years now. So really enjoying that. Absolutely enjoying that.
Awesome. And Ben, what about you?
Yeah. So my name is Ben. I'm 30, from Germany. And I'm a part of the community of animal keeping for basically my lifetime. Got into it when I was pretty early, as a lot of us, I guess. And today my passion is working with mammals, especially primates. That's just something that I'm super excited about. And it's a difficult topic, but a very rewarding one. So we will see how it goes. And yeah, from now on, some people out there can be, can be following along the journey.
Yeah. And if anyone should go check out Ben's episode of Project Herpetoculture to hear some of his story, because he's got a pretty fascinating story that, I'll leave it to you guys to go listen to because it's really interesting. And Flo, how about you?
Hi, my name is Flo. I'm from Stuttgart, Germany. And at the moment, I'm just keeping one species of reptile, the Enyalioides laticeps. And I specialize in creating naturalistic enclosures. And yeah, that's basically it.
Awesome. And Till?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Till. I'm 27 years old. I'm from Düsseldorf, also Germany. And yeah, I'm into the hobby for, I think, since I'm 14 or 13 or something like that. And I'm keeping some colubrids and some lizards, but not a lot. And I also have some spiders, but I got more and more into this plant hobby. And yeah, I think that's my main focus for now. So yeah, planted vivariums and also exotic plants in general.
Yes. Yeah. You guys are all bit by the greenhouse bug.
Oh yeah, greenhouse boys, sure, yeah. gang.
The greenhouse boys. So I want to discuss the project you guys are working on. We'll get into some other stuff. Like I really want to talk about the difference between American and European herpetoculture, because I think that's kind of a fascinating topic. But just at the top of the show, let's discuss your podcast that you are all creating together. So maybe Stefan, I don't know where it came from initially. Was it Stefan's idea, or where did this idea pop up originally?
Honestly, I've been thinking about this, and we've also been discussing this. And it started a bit on my way back from my first time meeting up with the Greenhouse Boys that are with us in this podcast. And we were on the way back, and I was talking to Till and Jonah, who was also with us. And then we were discussing about other options, how we could highlight some of the cool stuff that was happening in our hobby. And that's when the idea came. And after that, of course, we went home, and I was a guest on a few more podcasts. And all those podcasts were either the States or UK. So then I said to the boys, like, hey, have you ever thought about doing a podcast based in Europe? And everybody was like, yes. And the rest is history, pretty much. It went very fast from that. I don't know if anybody wants to add something to that, but to me, I asked a question and everybody was like, yeah. And then the hype started to rise and we started to meet up. And yeah. It was done.
I would like to ask Flo about his experience of how it all came together.
Okay. Yeah, it was for me, it was really fast because we thought about it and we once talked together on a FaceTime call, and basically 1 week later we all bought some mics and set up our first meeting, and then it started rolling. And to be honest, it was I think it's cool that we really did it and not only talked about it. And yeah, the idea for me was also there for a little bit longer. Actually, Till, Ben, and I also talked about it separately, that we want to do something like this. And I think with Stefan, it's the perfect match. That was a dream come true, because when I was younger, Stefan was a big inspiration. Or for all of us, Stefan was a big inspiration. And now we are together with him in this project. It's very cool.
You get to hang out with the famous guy.
Yeah.
And Till, what about you?
I remember Flo, Ben, and I we still do it. We used to FaceTime every now and then, and it got more and more frequently. And we talked about our project and stuff we were doing, and also private stuff, just how long distance friends do it. And at some point we were joking about, if we could have recorded that, that would have been a nice podcast episode. So for us three, it first was just a joke, and but it got more and more serious.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did you all meet initially? Obviously, the three of you are in Germany. Had you guys interacted with each other just within the hobby at shows and everything before, or was this something that was on Instagram is that where you met initially?
Yeah, kind of. I want to say, Till, Flo, and me, all of us, we knew about Stefan, what he was doing already, probably before we even got into contact with each other. I'm not sure about that, but yeah. At the end of the day, we just connected over Instagram, going for the same hashtags and then, liking each other's pictures or whatever. And yeah, from there on, it kind of spiraled a little bit out of control. And yeah, today we are really, I want to say, working on a bigger vision for the hobby kind of together. And all of us, we are taking the hobby pretty seriously in what we're doing. And yeah, we like to share our knowledge and experiences with each other. And why not do that publicly and have a stage to invite some, high quality guests over so you can be in the first row, and enabled to ask the questions that you want. Yeah.
And I can definitely say buying the microphone is a very exciting part of starting a podcast. It's like a very official thing, and in some ways it's the most exciting part until you really start developing the show. It's like the easiest part, but also the most official part of starting a podcast. So I can definitely relate to that. So Stefan, how do you feel about these three? Because they obviously look up to you, but I know that as a creator, it's one of those things where people look up to you because you make videos and you are just you. And so you can't view yourself from an external point of view, but you have people who obviously look up to you and have been watching your content. Does it feel weird?
No, man, this is what I was made for.
Papa Stefan.
No, this is very odd to me. Of course, it is the biggest compliment you can get, of course, and that's also a little bit of the goal, or at least have people watch and see something that makes them either change their ideas or get an extra idea or be inspired to do something. But it's funny because for me it's the other way around also, because there's a reason I asked the boys to do this together, because the idea was there, and I felt like I wasn't ready to do it completely on my own, and I was looking for. Well, I wasn't really looking for people. I knew that if I wanted to do it with other people, it would be with Till, Flo, and Ben, because we've met, we had a good rapport, and I really like all their different qualities. And they're such different persons, but they also all have the same goal and the same vision. And I just really connected with that. And I look at all their setups and I get inspiration from that. So for me, it was very natural to ask them to do this together. And to have them say this, it's almost a bit weird. So yeah, we're gonna work on switching that.
Yeah,
or maybe grow in the next generation.
Yeah,
and then we can look down on some people. No, not look down, but we see some people rising. Yeah, that's also cool. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, look down and keep them down where they are. We don't want anybody else coming around.
That's the language barrier. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's good.
I hope it's all right for everybody.
Yeah,
I think it's also good. Maybe it's also good to tell the audience that we are with 4 people, but not every episode is gonna be with 2 persons. The reason I'm doing this together with the boys is because all of them have certain qualities and expertise, and they have a certain way of asking questions. So when we are going to do the episode, it is in the beginning mostly be me as the host, and then one of the boys is going to join in depending on the guest we have. So if we have a guest who is very deep into plants and knows a lot, it's only logical to have Till lead that conversation, because Till also knows that. And if we were going to talk about decoration, it's going to be Flo, and more conservation or more zoological topics, then it's going to be more Ben. So that's the reason we are doing this together, so we can just put the right qualities in the right spot, in the right conversation, and also with the goal to one day maybe, all of the boys have thought about also doing a podcast on their own. So maybe one day one of the people in this group is like, oh, I want to do a podcast more specific to zoological topics or more specific to whatever topic. Then they could just split off. We all learned together and we built an audience together and we had fun together. And so that's also the reason why we're starting with 4. And except for roundtable episodes, it's not going to be 5 people all at once every time.
Yeah. No, that's good to clear up. And I think that's a perfect system because you'll be able to access everybody's level of knowledge and extract the most of the guests that you have on the podcast. So I think that's brilliant. I'm very curious to know what each of your sort of goal with the podcast is, or being, you're going to have lots of conversations over the next year with people. Do you have a set of ideas that you would like to get from that, or are you just going into it with an open mind, or where do you sit on this? And maybe we'll start with Flo. Do you want to jump on that one first?
Yeah, I think for me it's a lot of goals, to be honest. Like, I think the main goal is to really showcase that we are all on the same boat in this hobby and that we are not should work against each other instead of working together. I think that's something that's oftentimes missing in the hobby because we are such a small community and we are all in the same boat. And I think that's a big part, to connect people and of course, learn and experience from other keepers and just showcase that the reptile or exotic hobby is not just these people that keep their animals in plastic tubs. We have something important to say, and that's the goal. And of course, meet people and also learn from them. That's my goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what about you, Till?
I think for me it's also getting another or more inspiration by people, getting in touch with interesting people, and also having some kind of deep talk which you can't always have on the classic social media pages. Of course, you can have a chat or something like that on Instagram, but a podcast is more having a tea with a friend and talking about different things in the hobby. And I think that has a nice value, and it's cool to also share that with others that are listening to the podcast.
Yeah. You'll find as you get better and better at interviewing people and just chatting with people, there will be things that will reveal itself within each conversation that you didn't realize that was even part of the plan. As you guys know, you seem like the structure for this conversation. I am a relatively structured person, but as long as you stay open-minded and curious, having conversations with people, you'll start developing ideas with the guest that neither of you came to the episode with, which I think is one of the coolest things about recording a podcast. And you need that space and the flexibility and the freedom that a long-form conversation gives you in order, you can't say everything in a 30-second reel on Instagram type thing. What about you, Ben?
I think that I would like to see all of us being a part in just building a platform that is overall positive for the hobby. And by positive for the hobby, I mean we should work on positive exchange of ideas and maybe ways of taking care of animals or building habitats or whatever, so that people who are out there listening, can level up their own keeping and therefore the animal welfare at the end of the day. And so each one of us has their own vivarium project, I want to say, going on at home. For Stefan, for example, it is a collection of turtles and lizards, basically keeping and breeding the animals. For Flo, it is, or for the moment it was, kind of building this one amazing habitat that is really close to home where the animals actually come from. For Till, it is a little bit like that, but definitely with a lot stronger focus on the plants. So I just like to see everybody with their own projects, learning stuff from the discussions that we're having here. For example, Stefan and me, we have been to Switzerland for like a week, 2-3 weeks ago, and we have been to a turtle conservation center together, and they showed us some really cool ways of setting up basically a turtle station. And I can see us, for example, inviting some guests from over there to our podcast to teach the audience how to replicate something like that at home. And I think it can be very valuable to do that. And we have a good network of interesting people, and we can bring on some cool guests, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the guest list as it comes out. You'll find that the guest list will be infinite as you start making the show, because there's always going to be interesting people to talk to. Stefan, can you also let us know what your kind of vision or goal is with the show, but also tell us the name of the podcast, because I don't think we've mentioned it.
I was just thinking about that actually, Denning. Maybe we should have mentioned it. Yeah, so it's going to be called European Herpetoculture Podcast. So that pretty much encompasses what the goal is, or at least what we will showcase. And I can't add a lot to what the boys have already said. I think that's the main goal. To say it in one sentence is add value. Mm-hmm. That's the goal.
Yeah.
And that value can, of course, be determined by the listener and not up to us. But if that is what we will achieve, then I'm satisfied.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And as far as the each of you sort of mentioned guests and types of episodes, maybe we could just give a elevator pitch for the type of podcast or the type of guests that you're going to have on the podcast. Ben, you'd already mentioned some potentially like the turtle conservation, but are there any other guests or type of guests that you think that you'll be kind of are on your target list for people in the future? Whoever wants to grab that when they can.
I think we have like a pretty interesting list of people, like very diverse. Each of us have like their own little network where we can pull in people. Like Ben has great connection to the zoo world, and that way we can have like zookeepers or curators or even vets, zoo vets. And yeah, Till has some awesome plant friends and also other reptile keepers. And yeah, myself as well. I think we have like, a very, very diverse list, from friends to like professionals that we even don't know. Like it's everything is in there. Yeah.
Awesome. Does anyone have anything they want to add to that? That's a pretty rounded list, I think.
No, that's it.
That's good.
We're going to start with people we know, because that's we are all learning together. So we felt like if we already have a rapport with somebody, it's going to be a little bit easier. But of course, our goal is to just highlight the complete range of people that you can find within European herpetoculture. So that means that in the beginning, we also will only have European guests, including maybe, Asia and a bit of the UK, to us, they are still part of it. But because we want to highlight that area, because that's also one of the reasons we are doing this, is that our hobby is represented by a certain select group almost, and we feel a bit underrepresented, I almost want to say. So we're going to start with that, and it's going to be people from the private sector to professionals and people who work with one species or people who have giant collections. It doesn't matter.
Well, I think having each of you have your own network is going to make it very easy to continue to have like an evergreen guest list. That'll be huge, and I think it's good to start with someone you have a rapport with. I remember my very first episode I recorded with TC Houston of Reptile Mountain. I think Stefan, you would know who he is. I was terrified. Like I was so scared because I was not really in the hobby and I wasn't really like online at all. So it was just like terrifying experience. It went really well, but I was scared. So you'll kind of be able to avoid that if your first few interviews are with friends. And
how do you feel today, Dylan?
I'm feeling you guys are really making me nervous.
Really?
No, it's like
guys from the other side of the world. Huh?
Yeah. No, after
just for you,
several hundred hours, you start to get more relaxed. But it's still, there is some complication with being, hosting a show. So maybe I want to ask if you guys have any questions about running a podcast in a second. And one thing that you had just talked about, Stefan, which I think is really important, is YouTube is a very dominated space on the American side. So a lot of the content that people see on both sides of the ocean is American produced shows. And so I think to say that it's underrepresented is actually a pretty accurate. You know, that doesn't mean that there's not big channels in Europe or in the UK, but obviously the Americans have the sort of the stakehold on that. So it does sort of paint, it colors the herpetoculture in an American way, which is neither good or bad. It just means that it would be nice to see some more diverse opinions and styles of keeping and whatnot. But I want to jump into the differences between those two cultures in a second. But before, do you guys have any questions about running a podcast or hosting a show? Or like we talked about before we hit record, maybe this is not uninteresting for listeners, but maybe it will be, because I'm sure there's many people that want to start their own show as well. So I'm happy to help or answer questions if anybody has.
Yeah, what was the question that we were talking about earlier?
You were asking about filming.
About if it's better to film yourself individually and make a screen recording maybe on OBS or save the video file locally so we have the high definition, you know. What do you think about it? Does it really make a difference?
Well, maybe the people in the comments can let me know. I'll tell you what it does. It does add work, because if you record with a high quality camera, then you know that's a little bit extra editing, and you're not just using the file that you get from Zoom or whatever software you're using. But I think it is nice to have the host clear, because your guest is always going to be on a webcam, and it gives the viewer or the listener something nice to like rely on, that the guest quality is high. But it's definitely not a mandatory thing at all, because webcams are getting quite high in quality now. The main thing is sound, like audio quality on the host side. There's nothing more annoying than listening to a podcast where the host is like, "Hey, welcome to the show," and you can't hear them at all. And it's like, no, you need to. And you guys all sound great today, so that's, I think, the biggest key.
Really?
Yes, you sound clean, clear.
Yes.
Good
Because
mics.
it's really new for most of us, I guess, to have
Good microphone choice.
an external microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
So
the
what do you
microphone you
think
guys
what
bought?
I'm using?
Yeah, are you guys all using the same microphone or
Not really.
no?
No. All different.
I think-
I think Stefan and I are using the same, right? The Podi mic USB. Stefan?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, sorry, I was like doing this.
Yeah. Until, what are you using?
I'm just going with the AirPods Pro.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
and,
Those sound good.
Yeah. And I think I'm the only one joining with the mobile phone. So I have a desktop computer, but I don't have a webcam or stuff. So I'm the cheap guy, and that's why I'm still going without a professional setup right now.
Yeah. Your money's in plants.
Yeah.
Growing.
Yeah. This week is some Taiwan import incoming, so money went there.
Yeah.
Stakeholder ferns.
No, that sounds good. And Ben, is
What did you get though?
Oh, yeah,
Stakeholder
tell us.
ferns.
3 different species of staghorn ferns.
Tell
But,
the listeners, what is a stakeholder fern?
A staghorn fern is something like this. These epiphytic ferns that sit on the side of a tree, and there are some pretty nice, pretty interesting species, and I got into it last year, and I can't get
You
enough.
can mount them on the walls.
You can mount them on the walls, yeah, right?
Yeah.
Have them just like this on a board, and you can just place them back.
Yeah. I have one in my carpet python enclosure, and I'm like, I'm not very good with plants, so I thought this thing is going to die for sure, but I was just going to try it, and it actually has been doing really well, and it's actually really interesting to watch it grow. I don't really know much about how it's growing, but it's like pushing out, I don't know, maybe Till, you know, it's like almost like there's a base to the plant and there's like a new base to it that's now pushing out new leaves, and the old one's kind of dying. It's pretty interesting.
I would assume it's the Platycerium bifurcatum, like the most accessible species, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know the species, but it's obviously the most accessible. It's like my local greenhouse.
Okay, then it will be the bifurcatum, and before I talk too much about it, but there are mainly 2 different types of Platycerium, and one are these pub-forming species, like the one you have. They usually can also get very big, but not huge. and they start building pups like with a new shield front, and they are just popping out at the sides. So in nature, you can see like big patches of 10 plants or something next to each other. And then you have the the species that can just reproduce through spores. And these are like the solitary ones, like that one. And they will form a big, how do I say in English, Trichter?
No.
They like have an open shield that's open to the top. So leaves and stuff, fall into it. And that's how they get their nutrients. And they can get, over 3 meters.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah, very interesting, very cool.
So maybe Dylan, maybe you can put some, old leaves or maybe some snake poop
into the
fern.
All right, I'll give it a shot.
About it too.
Like I said, I'm surprised that it's lasted this whole time. It's always nice when you start to see new growth. You're like, okay, it's not going to die. It's hanging on there, so it's good. They are really
neat. Maybe you can try like removing one of the pups and mount it on a plate with some moss, and then you can just hang it into your bathroom, and you have a new houseplant.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
Yeah, nice.
Well, I think
I would like to ask you a quick question.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Because you were just about to ask me about my microphone. Or whatever.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
I'm using a Blue Yeti USB microphone. It's like $100, and I hope it's okay. And a €20 webcam.
Yeah, it sounds fine.
All right for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because we were speaking a little bit about questions towards running a podcast. How is it when we're speaking? And for example, I'm adding a quick addition to what somebody says. Is it all right? And can you hear it well, or do we have some delay and it's just not good to add little extra sentences, or maybe just have bigger blocks, in one?
I think in this conversation it seems fine, just because that's a connection question. So if you or your guest, everybody has good connection, it sounds like everybody has good connection today, then that's totally fine. If there's a little bit delay, that becomes like a total nightmare, and you pick up on it really fast. Like you just know that you have to be totally silent when the guest is speaking.
Oh, but I feel like today it's going fine, right?
Yeah, I'm here. You're coming in loud and clear for me.
All right, perfect.
Well,
yeah. So about top podcast, I have another question. To be
sure.
honest, but it's more like a full topic, And on our agenda, we have the point is like the differences in equipment being used and whatever. And my question is related to that topic. So maybe we can just start, and then once we go there, I will go. Otherwise, I can ask now.
Is it like a podcast equipment question, or is it like keeping?
Yeah, it's about how you connect sponsors to your project, and how you can maybe use that to generate some revenue.
Well, that's something that
what is your stage about that? That's what I'm interested in.
I think it's for people who've been listening to the show, they know that it's something that I've just recently started to toy with. I've had a few sponsors along the years, but I've just recently started to get, like, this episode will be sponsored by the Bio Dude, and it's something I've just recently explored. I think it is very valuable. I mean, you have to find companies that are aligned with what you guys are talking about, and they have the same philosophy. You really want that relationship to be, like, one thing that I'm noticing with YouTube is I cannot stand the YouTube ads anymore. It's getting so outrageous. I mean, most people here probably just use an ad blocker. And I think that's what's happening, is because it's like, how many Dodge Ram commercials? I mean, you guys won't have commercials for Dodge Ram, like pickup trucks, but like, it's like 5 of them in a row. It's just so insane that people are starting to get tired of it. And I think people are blocking the ads. So you start to, lose some revenue there. But I think I would rather the listener hear an ad for a product or a service that will actually positively impact their reptile keeping. Like, that way it's not as much of like, oh, here we got to tap through this. It's like, no, I actually want to hear what this ad is about in case there's a product or something that will add value to my reptile room in some capacity. So I think as long as you find sponsors that are kind of in line with the philosophy of the show, which shouldn't be hard because there's lots of brands now that are promoting, their vision is higher welfare standards and doing just better by the reptile. So I think that's the key. As any reptile keeper knows, proper nutrition is a cornerstone of animal welfare in captivity. That's why I want to take a quick minute to tell you all about Zoo Med's Dragon Food. Dragon Food is a specialized diet for bearded dragons. It comes in 2 formulations, one for juvenile animals and one for adult animals, and it is the result of 3 years of research and development. It is the first pet food to use green banana flour, which is a pesticide-free wheat alternative, which is low in sugar, and it's also a natural source of resistant starch, which feeds the microbiome in your dragon's gut. The product has a satisfying crunch, which simulates natural prey. As I already mentioned, it's wheat-free, it's also soy-free, and it uses real black soldier fly larvae for a high calcium protein source. If you own a bearded dragon and you're looking for a way to add some variety to their diet, please check out Zoo Med's Dragon Food. For more information on this or any other Zoo Med product, make sure you head to zoomed.com or check out the link in the show notes or the YouTube description.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I'm really interested in, because obviously all of us, we are using products from the hobby, and I guess we made some choices to use the right ones. We will speak about it later. And so there's an option to, work together on making something public, both speaking the brand itself and the podcast along the way, because some added revenue will give us some, options to do cool stuff.
Yeah. Especially if it's things you're already using and you like, then that's even better.
Yeah.
That's a good relationship. Well, should we dive into the topic of European versus American herpetoculture? I mean, I think this is a topic that Stefan brought to me like months ago now, and we were going to do a podcast on it. So I thought we'd fold it into this because I think it is fascinating. As a North American, I think there's this, in some ways it's a myth, but in some ways it's true, is that we just put European keepers on a pedestal. Typically we just say like they're the best keepers. I mean, like one of the inside jokes between Roy and Phil is, I'm sure many of you have heard this, is that Roy or Phil assumed that Roy was from Europe just purely based off of his enclosures, and for the entire time he thought he was from the UK or something. But that's so true. It's like that's a very common reaction to seeing a well-planted, well-set-up enclosure, is like, oh, they must be in Europe. And maybe that's not true. Maybe that's just sort of a myth that we've developed on our side. Obviously, there are aspects of that are true, but maybe, Stefan, did you want to just kind of start this topic? Because you were the one that was sort of thinking about it, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a very good question. And I have to be honest, especially the first almost season of our European Herpetoculture podcast is going to be, part of it is also going to be exploring that exact question. Because honestly, we saw some differences, but we only started thinking about it when we were invited on your project Herpetoculture. So to us, it was all one hobby, and you saw some differences, just as you see cultural differences between the Netherlands and Germany and Canada. So that is when we started to explore that question. And yeah, it's a very hard question to ask. So that's why we are going to explore them also with other people. I would almost say maybe it's a part marketing, and maybe the US is doing just a very bad job at marketing their side of the hobby. I don't know. That could also be it, or maybe in Europe we are just a bit more private, and therefore the people that share something are pretty confident about what they are doing. I'm going on a bit of a tangent. I'm sorry. So pull me back, boys, if you heard me something say that's not correct.
Yeah, if anyone wants to jump in and add, go for it.
That's totally what I'm thinking. The people who are out there on social media showing the world what they are doing, usually they try to find the perfect framing and the perfect shot, and after editing, a little bit more color saturation maybe. And, so that way online on Instagram, mostly you see the beautiful shots, and you never know how the conditions are actually like at the people's places. And you in the United States, what you can see from the European hobby, it's mostly on Instagram today. A couple of years ago, maybe it was still some forums and stuff, but it's the same thing at the end of the day. The people who do their job in a shitty way are not public about it. So that helps us to have a good reputation. But on the other hand, I feel like we are also doing some cool stuff over here. There are a lot of cool keepers here. And the hobby is very diverse. I feel like we have a lot of species that are maybe not even available in the United States. For example, yeah, for me, it's definitely like that. My animals are not available in the US. Stefan, the Lantanotis, I guess, is also a crazy investment to get into it. And Stefan, he's keeping them like sheep at his place. So yeah, we have some cool people here, and yeah, we can maybe try to bring on some interesting guests. And I think also what helps us is the fact that in a lot of European countries, we are regulated maybe a lot more strongly by the authorities, and we have strict measures about the sizes of enclosures and equipment that you or factors that you need to offer to the animals. So rack keeping, I'm not even sure if it's legal in most European countries, rack keeping for most snakes. And so that's just maybe a cultural thing. And that we are be more on this bioactive wave, you can say. Yeah. And that's what we are strongly promoting too. Yeah.
Yeah. Till, do you have anything to add to that as far as some of those differences?
Yeah, I have some things that Ben and Stefan said that I can catch up to, because I've recognized that especially like the elder generation inside the hobby is very careful and private, at least in Germany. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But when I bought some things in the past or visited some breeders, a lot of them don't want to have people they don't know at their house. I don't like to share things. And one point can be like the authorities. You don't want to have the veterinarian office over at your place, so you don't want to share too much information about your location and how you keep your animals. And also, I think in Germany, it's a bit a cliche, but I had this in my I experienced it last year. You have the like bad neighbors, so neighbors that can get very much into your privacy and yeah, like to give you some struggles. And if they know you keep snakes, you're maybe not their favorite one. And this could also be a part of why people over here don't like to share as much. But I have the feeling that the younger generation starts to share more of their hobby because it's also a generation thing to be more on social media than it was 10 years ago.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And Flo, what are your thoughts there?
I think what's also like a big difference is like that in the US, for me, it seems like that a lot of more people want to go create a business with the whole animal keeping hobby. And I think that's not as common here because, like, for example, nearby me, it's like we have no reptile stores, for example. And I think it's also like, what window are you looking through? Because for me, the North American hobby seems pretty similar to the European side. And also, for example, when the people that have nothing to do with the hobby in Germany, for example, they only see the hobby through the media, and they think all of the reptile people are like crazy, keeping the animals like trash. And I think that's like, it depends on what viewpoint do you have. Like, I think in the US, it's like much more people upload videos, and therefore you see much more people keeping their animals and not in very good conditions. And in Germany, I feel like we have almost none reptile YouTubers, like big reptile YouTubers. And therefore, it's like only the guys on Instagram. But when you know some people and go to expos, you see, I think, basically the same people that we see in the US.
Right.
So,
it's some sort of a question in which bubble you are in, like you said, Flo, because I think years ago, before I met you guys, I was just mainly on Facebook groups and wasn't that much into natural keeping, just, sticking the toe in. And I saw way more shitty keeping and, not so nice stuff in the German hobby. But then I, got to know more people, focused on more things, like natural vivariums and plants. And that way I followed the people that did the nice stuff. And now I was surrounded by these things and I didn't look as much into the bad side of the hobby here in Germany. And I have a feeling like the people from overseas that I'm following are also doing nice stuff. So I don't see that much of the bad keeping in the US and the Canada hobby because I'm in this bubble that's doing it right, in my opinion. So right now I don't see as much shitty keeping over there and over here because
Different.
I'm
Different keeping tail, not shitty.
yeah, different. No, you know how I mean it. But I'm looking at the things I would like to see.
Exactly. And yeah, that's a great point as far as like, kind of what Flo said as far as the imagery goes. What window are you looking in? That really does change the way you perceive herpetoculture in general, because your feed is just feeding you the things that you like to see. And if you don't want to see ball python morphs and racks, then you just, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind thing. But I think there is, and so you guys have kind of hit on this. I think there is at least from our point of view, me being Canadian, I'm sort of like able to look at things from like almost an outsider perspective, I feel like, because it is quite a small community here. But there is this like mysterious piece to European keepers, right? Like you said, there's this privacy aspect to it that seems a lot more potent for European keepers. They want to share what they're doing, but they're not like, hey guys, here's my baby child that I just had who's like in the crib on the floor here, and then here's like the terrarium I just built or the vivarium that I just put together. There's that's sort of eliminated, so it's just like a photo of the vivarium. So that is seems to be more of like a North American thing, at least in the reptile side. But also, I forget who had said it, maybe it was Till, with the business aspect. That does seem to have a very strong thread on this side where people, it's a very, very quick jump for many people from getting into keeping to wanting to turn it into a business, whether that's either on social media and content creation or just breeding and being able to vend at a table. That has really shrunk over here, the time difference between getting into it and jumping into like the business side. So to me, that seems like a big difference. Is that something that you guys have picked up on as well? I mean, obviously Till has, I think you had mentioned it.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, there are some differences. As I mentioned, even in Europe, there are so many cultural differences. So that was one that stood out to us in our conversations, that it seems to be quicker than to go into business. You also notice that because I got to be honest, I don't sell outside of Europe just by principle. I want to keep stuff in Europe, but I could sell my animals for a lot more money if I send them to the US, because also their prices are simply higher. So people are also almost more willing to invest in certain animals. So that's also a really big difference. So that's almost what I like about, if I look at the States and the idea of investing, that this is an animal and I'm okay with spending 5 times as much as I would do in Europe, because we are talking about big differences sometimes. And then I get all cranky that my friends are sending all their animals to Asia and to the States, but in the meantime, nobody in Europe is paying those prices. So, that's also a thing. But that's to me one of the bigger differences. And I believe it was a podcast I saw you do, Dylan, a while ago, about also the perception of the hobby and being negative and calling a certain generation old school almost. To me, honestly, I don't know if it is the same with the boys, but to me, honestly, like the rack keeping and all that stuff, to me, that's new. Because if we started, it was only logical to have plants. All the info we got was this is how the surrounding looks, this is how you decorate a plant. There were already a lot of those fake plants, and of course we prefer live now, but in those time it was still like creating something a bit more natural, maybe because it was highly connected with the aquarium hobby, and there it's only logical that you do it almost as natural as possible. And the whole rag keeping and that business side almost came over the ocean to us with the ball python. I'm sorry, with the ball pythons, that was almost introduced to us. So to me, that's new. So it's also in web. At what point did you start?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
I guess
we do. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to add maybe one thing. I guess it's also related to the fact that in the US, you just have so much more people participating in the hobby than what we have here. Yeah, so I feel like you have amazing keepers over in America. We have amazing people over here. Maybe the percentage is a little higher here in Europe. I have no idea. It's a possibility. We also have the shitty keepers, and you have those too. But due to the size of the hobby in the United States, it's just everything's all right.
Yeah. I think Stefan don't want us to say shitty.
We shouldn't.
Stefan's trying to be more political.
All right, what can I say instead?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
The terrible keepers. So
no. It's just so funny that you all was like, oh yeah, positive, and then shitty.
Like that shit, man. All right, yeah. So just due to the fact that the Americans' side of the hobby is just so much bigger, you have a lot of these shitty keepers, and you have a lot of people in public. So you have a lot of kind of shitty people also in public. Yeah, that's maybe a problem. We just don't have that.
The definitely population plays a big role in that. And I think there was a very strange time from like 2015 to 2020 where PetTube on YouTube was like the best thing you can get into. So there was a very strong, and like if you're a teenager and you're making $15,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 a month in your parents' basement buying animals, I mean, how do you convince a kid not to do that? And so that was a very strange point in the hobby as well, that I don't think Europe didn't seem to have that same gravitational pull towards doing that type of thing. And you know, some of those people are great and they have great keeping standards, but there's a lot of them that it was obvious that it was like just a like harboring animals situation that wasn't going to be very, you know, wasn't adding value, to use Stefan's word from earlier. You know, it was just simply showing animals off for people as entertainment. And it doesn't seem like that really grabbed hold in Europe, I don't think.
No, definitely. And that's also, I don't want to make too much connections to my channel, because to me, this is separate, although of course I will try to get people from the channel to this podcast. But that's also the reason why, one of the reasons why I started the channel at the time. And I do have to say that there are some really cool people doing a lot of cool YouTube videos in Europe. But one of the main differences, I think, also in our culture is that there are so many languages. Like I'm learning to read German and trying to speak German to the delight of my German friends, because, you know, there's so much literature in German. But then one of the better Dart Frog books, as Marcel said 2 weeks ago, is in Dutch. And there's a great channel by Guillem. He's Spanish, I believe. So everything is in Spanish. There's a great channel in France. Well, I'm sorry, but my French is, you know? So, yeah. So that's why we are also doing it in English, even though it's not our native language.
Yeah.
It's just a way to pass that barrier.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything to add to that before I move on?
No, something popped in my head. Like,
Sure.
I feel also like the people in the US, like all the bigger YouTubers, they want to be like more like entertainers or stars. You know what I mean? And I think that also comes like from TV shows and stuff like that. That you have like on the TV, because like in the US everything is like screaming and big movement and acting crazy in front of the camera. And I think when you're a child, you're gonna look up to this and say like, oh, okay, that's how it's done. That's how I want to be. And in Germany, we don't have like these crazy people who scream in front of the TV. You know what I mean? And I think that also we don't have like people like this representing the hobby. Also,
Yes,
Very good
because
point.
it's not like that flashy, crazy action. Or everybody wants to be Steve Irwin, and yeah, I think that's also like something different.
Totally. I watch, one of the only things I watch on TV is I watch Formula One, and I find it hilarious that it's starting to get this, this American market. And I've been watching for a long time.
Yeah.
And now there's like a few races in America, but one's in Vegas and one's in Miami. And the amount of stuff that the Americans do for those races, like a lot of the European viewers are like, what's going on here? Like, why are we doing so much extra, like, fireworks and all these crazy things? It's just it's a very cultural, it's just different cultures. And I think, even when it comes down to, like, one of the things I want to talk about is equipment differences. And you just go to a different country, you're going to see different foods, different things that are just part of that country. But I think it's very strange that even in herpetoculture, the types of equipment that we use on either side of the ocean is totally different. Even when it comes down to vivariums, which is you guys all use, well, I guess, Stefan, maybe you're slightly different with your turtles, and I think you use a lot of Exoterra and whatnot. But the greenhouse boys, you guys are building, a lot of these enclosures by hand and using your own equipment. So should we go down the path of equipment differences and things that you guys notice between the two?
Yeah.
Who wants to jump on that? Ben?
Sure.
It's the Ben topic.
First of all, Dylan, I would like to ask you specifically, which brands are you using for, on the one hand, misting system, for a lighting system? I'd be interested. Also, if you have some water pumps going, is there a specific brand that is recommended? And for the automation, if you're using a smart home system or digital timers. Yeah.
So my enclosures are Maximum Reptile Enclosures from Custom Reptile Habitats. That's one of my sponsors of the channel. So those is similar to the enclosures that you guys are building, kind of with the square framing and whatnot. The lighting is mostly Arcadia. I have a few like Sunblaster LEDs, which are more of like a plant type light, like a greenhouse light. Mist King for misters. I don't know. Do you guys have Mist King? Yeah, you guys use Mist King there. Yeah. So that's what I use for my mister. And then for automation, I use, I forget. I actually learned this from the Project Herpetoculture podcast from Jason Hood. It's just it's a digital timer, and it actually, you can like program it for the coordinates, and it'll sort of, the sunrise and sunset changes throughout the year. So that's just the only thing I use. It kind of comes on and off on its own. And I just have it set to like somewhere in sort of Central America. That's sort of standard to kind of match most of my animals. I don't use any like home systems as far as like Wi-Fi control. I used to, but I found that the building that I used to live in would always have these power outages. So as soon as the power would cut out and then kick back on before my router would boot back up, all my lights would turn on. It would be like the middle of the night and all my lights would turn back on until the internet reconnected and it would realize that the lights shouldn't be on. So I didn't love that, but yeah, that's kind of the equipment that I'm using.
Interesting. Yeah, so I guess all of us, we're good, well-paying customers of Arcadia too. Not for all of our lighting, but for most, or the bigger percentage, I would say. And I guess we're pretty happy with that over here. It's a very popular brand, I feel like. We even see marketing on Instagram today. So it's really established, I guess. But there are even a lot more expensive lighting that you could use. And Stefan and me, we've been talking about it, on the trip that we had. It's LEDs that can just cost $1,000 for just a light,
Yes.
And for example, what Stefan has behind him over there, over his seawater aquarium. Yeah, and we would like to see a lot of people getting more into investing into the keeping, like what Stefan said earlier. In the States, it seems like a lot of people are ready to make investments for the hobby in terms of purchase price of the animal, but also when it comes to equipment, why not use a light for 500 euros if it's the best one that you can find, and you can have the perfect habitat for your animals? Why not do that? And that's something that we would like to be after, but we still got to learn a lot. So that's maybe also an interesting topic to have some brands at our podcast, probably. And for what else? For misting, we use the Mist King. That's also a pretty good product, I guess. It's available here. For the automation, we are now, or more or less, I'm not sure about everybody, but starting to use the smart home system. Me personally, I'm using Philips Hue connected to Google Home Assistant. And in my opinion, that's the best solution. Oh no, well, not the best. In my opinion, the best solution is still Google Home Assistant, but the smart home from Shelly. I'm sure it's available in the US too, I guess, but I'm pretty confident about that. And you can do great stuff with that, and that's something that we would like to grow even more, to have great automation for the setups too, because it's just helpful. Yeah. What else? Which brands are you using too, for example? It's the same, or?
Yeah, it's mostly the same. With Dylan, you mentioned the Mist King system. I think Flo and Ben also use these. I have it in this setup behind me. That's the only one where I use a misting system. And I think this time it's a little bit the other way around, because Mist King is mostly available in the US and Canada, and they are not very established on the German market. But I thought, okay, the boys use it. It seems to be good. I'm not very experienced with misting systems. And I found a used one on eBay and bought it. And soon I figured out that they have pretty high shipping costs here in Europe. And Flo and Ben saved my ass more than a couple of times when I needed some gadgets or some Mist King stuff. They brought it over, the adapters, and shipped it to my place, or brought it over when they visited. So that was very helpful. But I think there are a lot of different misting systems here in Europe that are more established and available, but I'm not very into that.
We kind of felt like misting is the best option. I'm not sure why, but we kind of all went for it. I'm not sure, Stefan, what are you using actually?
Mine burned. So, but there are many brands in there's one brand in the Netherlands, Jewel Spray, great brand, and there's a lot of similar to Mist King that just have a different label slapped on it and are available in Europe. I think to bring a little bit back to not specifically me, but to the European and maybe United States difference. We're going to go in that effort anyway. To me, it's funny that in the States, I saw videos of people building Euro-style terrariums.
Really?
So I wondered, what do you consider a Euro-style terrarium?
Well, I think that is more like a dart frog terminology in the dart frog keepers. I think that's where that's coming from. And the dart frog keepers will probably shoot me for. I'm not 100% sure. I've just watched lots of Troy Goldberg's videos, who does everything by hand. And when he makes the European style enclosures, I want to say it has something to do with the ventilation. Like it has a really interesting vent through the top. I don't know if it has anything to do with anything else. Or when you guys look at that, do you consider that European, or do you just consider it a glass box like everything else?
No, sorry, Flo.
No, it's because of the vents. It's called like this. Yeah. I think it was established in Europe, and then I don't know why you don't have it like as a staple, because like all of the basic terrariums that you can buy in a reptile store, for example, are these European style enclosures. So there's not specific for dartfrogs or something. It's like our basic terrarium here.
Yeah, that's what to me was odd, because that to me was just isn't that how a terrarium is supposed to look? That was my when I read that was my thought.
So can you remind me, like what's different about, like, the standard here would be like the Exoterra with vent or like a Zoomed enclosure with ventilation running across the bottom. Yeah. Is the European one, the ventilation was almost like a different? I forget, how did it work?
The idea, I believe, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is just simply that there is a ventilation strip underneath the front windows, so low in the front, and then a little bit in the middle, or a little bit more to the back in the ceiling. in the top is another ventilation strip. Hot air rises, therefore you create this under pressure, and fresh air is being pulled into your terrarium. Yeah. And that's basically the same style of terrarium building that you see through whole Europe, and indeed Exoterra also does it. Zoomed has it. So yeah, it was funny to me to be called that Euro style, because to me that was like a typical terrarium. If I would see a difference between us and the States, is maybe that in the States, I don't know if this is correct, but what is shown to me is a lot of aquariums with a lid made on top of it.
Yeah.
So you lose that European style terrarium. But even within the Netherlands and Germany, there's a big difference, because we use a lot of a certain type of wood who has a plastic finish that's used for concrete also. And we use that a lot. It's really dark brown. It looks like a cafe when you walk into it. And somehow I saw a lot of keepers in Germany all using OSB. So even within countries in Europe, that can be so different.
Yes, yeah.
I guess it's because...
But the States, to me...
Sorry, I guess it's because just the availability of materials is just so different. Yeah. And that's maybe also something that differentiates us for the moment from a lot of keepers in the States, because Till, Florian, and me, for example, we have these big aluminium setups. Stefan, for the moment, yours is still under construction because he's building one outside. Yeah. We call ourselves the greenhouse boys, because this greenhouse style of building the setups is what was really connecting us. And we use aluminium frames and polycarbonate panels and glass and also mesh for different sides of the setups to make something that is, on the one hand, very practical, very well thought of, and very good to use, and on the other hand, very aesthetic. And so we kind of sometimes call our setups like vivarium furniture, because we like to see these centerpieces in a living room, for example. That's a style that we like to promote, and it's not necessarily anything that is typical for Europe, although we have quite a lot of it, I want to say. But at the end of the day, it's just us with our project, raising the flag and putting Europe on the map.
So did one of you come to that conclusion and influence the others, or were you all working with that style of kind of DIY tubing enclosure on your own, and then just found each other on Instagram because you keep similar?
Yeah.
Ben, it's your
turn. I would like to hear Phil's story.
My story? Yeah. I think we use some of the methods or some parts of it in a different way. Like, I think I already used these aluminum frames to build some of my snakes enclosures, and everybody was working with some of the materials already. And then somehow, at least Flo, Ben, and I met, and we wrote on Instagram and on WhatsApp, and then we started meeting. And I'm not sure who had this idea, but Ben built his big greenhouse first, then Flo, and then I was like, oh, maybe something small for the plants. And then I did this one, but it's the smallest one out of us three. Yeah.
How tall is that?
2 meters 35.
Okay, so pretty. Yeah, so it's pretty big.
Yeah, I think that the basic idea was like to break it down really quickly. It was like we all hanging on FaceTime, and then we said like it would be so cool to have like botanical garden or a greenhouse at home. And you can buy greenhouses like in your hardware store or something, but we wanted to look like a piece of furniture. And we wanted to build something really big and that is easily movable and also not as heavy. I think that's, like, for me at least, one of the best parts about it. You can build like a huge enclosure and it weighs almost nothing. And yeah, I think we all inspired each other. Ben started this whole thing, and and then I was next, and we all learned from each other. That was also great, and it's super practical. To be honest, I wouldn't even consider buying another style of enclosure because it's practical.
It's the same for me.
Yeah.
For me, it's like we found a way that just works better than what is available. So I feel like from now on we are just doing it by ourselves. And it's kind of an intensive process, I want to say, to go through to get everything ready to build such a setup. It's the planning phase. Then you have to order all the equipment. Then the construction itself. Then you have to assemble all of the interior design and everything. And it's also expensive on the other hand. It's not like, well, for the size, it's pretty dope, I want to say. But due to the fact that we are building huge setups, it's like setups of the size that you can walk inside from like half a square meter to mine is about 8 for the moment. It's different connected parts. So it's like an investment in the hobby, not only money-wise, but also from time and effort. And that way you can, in my opinion, celebrate the animal a lot more because you go through this difficult process over a month or two to build your setup. And then you can finally, set your animal free and sometimes even say goodbye for a little while because you don't even find them. I can remember myself very well when I was at Flo's place, just looking for the lizards for 5 minutes, and I didn't even find them in the setups because it's just so huge and so, well planted and everything. And it's kind of a celebration to the hobby and the animal itself, in my opinion, if we build a setup that is just extraordinary. And that's what we would like to promote, this idea.
The best part about providing high-quality reptile husbandry is you get to develop a long-term relationship with your animal. Meet Jackson, my 18-year-old crested gecko. Jackson lives on the BioDudes Terrafauna substrate, which is one of their substrates that's specifically designed for warm biomes and humidity spikes. Like all other BioDudes substrates, it contains organic content to help support the plant life in Jackson's vivarium. It also holds moisture very well, which means humidity is never an issue, even in my dry climate. Another favorite of mine is the BioDudes Bug Grub. This is a supplement powder made from natural ingredients like carrots, beets, spirulina, oats, and potatoes. Everybody knows how important gut-loading feeder insects is, and this simplifies it for me and allows me to be confident when I feed both Jackson and my tarantulas that they're getting the nutrients they need to thrive. Also, if you have a lot of babies right now, this is a great way to help fortify the diets of neonatal reptiles. The BioDude has a ton of great educational content on both his YouTube channel and the website, all about bioactive care, and it's just one of those brands that's doing their part to push herpetoculture into a positive direction and give reptile keeping a better name.
And it has already been proven that this is very practical when you have to move, because Ben moved to a new place some time ago. I moved to a different city last year, and Flo is moving this year. And we helped each other to disassemble or assemble the setups. I remember with Ben, Flo and I came over and we deconstructed this huge greenhouse within half a day and transported everything to the new city. And at my place, Flo came over and we had how is it called? A crowbar, just ripping out the plates of the bigger snakes enclosures and just deconstructing everything. And you just need 1 or 2 persons carrying the single walls, and you can just stick it back together, repair the back wall, put the plants back in, and you have a finished setups within some hours. That was very nice to know that it works out that way.
Especially when we have huge enclosures and you invested a lot of money, like when you bought a wooden terrarium or even glass terrarium. I think you can throw this thing away when you move out.
Yeah.
At least in my apartment, because it
doesn't fit through the door.
Wouldn't even fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was like this big. And yeah, with this aluminum frame, it's like super easy. You have like connectors, and you could basically only like the whole thing you could transport in like 4 parts, and that's it.
And carry it by yourself.
Well, I think, I mean, I think that'll be for fascinating for people once you dig into the podcast. Like those are some really cool, like just keeping practices that people could pick up on that I think will be very beneficial. And I think it's interesting because 3 of you, with the exception of Stefan, really have a very small, like quote unquote, collection of animals, right? It's just you each are focused on essentially one project or maybe a few small projects. Stefan has a little more on the go, but that's almost counterintuitive to what we a lot of the time see on people that are producing content. It's like they have this huge, like, experience and a big group of animals. And you guys aren't that. You have that sort of separate. And of course, like I said, Stefan does have quite a few, but when we had you on the podcast years ago now, you had talked about kind of how your process has changed into just focusing on the things that you care about. And I think I cannot wait for things to get you guys to dig into topics further. Is there any other equipment things that you guys wanted to mention before we kind of wrap up on that?
I would like to add something. Because it's very interesting what you said, the fact that our collections are so small, and back in the day when I was not, still growing up, you can say, I always had this impression that owning a large and diverse collection is a goal in the hobby, kind of as a proof of competence, kind of. But today I feel the opposite is true. The more you funnel down, can you say that? The more you niche down on a certain project or a certain topic, the more of an expert you can become. And that's also a style that all of us, we want to promote. For example, even with Stefan, even though he has the biggest collection of all of us, you have to know he's a trained professional in the animal care industry. So we are just kind of hobbyists. Stefan, he really knows what he's doing. And he even focuses on a very specific project, even though he has a lot of individuals and even multiple species. But Stefan, I would like to hear what you are up to with your project.
I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah!
Man. I think people are. I think people are gonna learn that also during the podcast, because we are gonna also talk about our individual projects and how it's moving on. But to get a little bit back to that one species, Flo says something in his podcast, because we're doing episodes where we introduced each host a bit more in depth. And Flo said something that I really liked, and he said, having one enclosure can already be overwhelming. It just depends on how deep you get into it. So that was really fascinating to me. Yeah, I really liked that, what he said. I was like, oh yeah, my boy. I really liked what he said. But when it comes to my project, yes, I have different species, but I do pinpoint a bit, because I keep animals from a very select area. I keep animals who have a very similar habitat that they live in, who are even found in the same regions. And I have one room that's pretty much dedicated to that specific area. And all the techniques and all the foods that the animals get are all similar. So that is how I am possible to do the way that I do it and still keep a certain quality. Although I feel like at the moment I know I can do better, and the fact that it's not happening right now because of budget and time and whatever, again, frustrates the hell out of me.
Everybody feels like that at any given moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very recognizable. Yeah. And I've talked also with Ben. I have 2 rooms, and in one room I have my Asian turtles, who are from Southeast China, really cool, the parts, so Cecalia platysternon. And the goal is eventually to have that space just dedicated to those animals and totally take the monetary part out of it, which means that I want to build something that is more of an insurance colony with no selling of captive bred. And so it is a specific project, but it just encompasses multiple animals instead of digging into one species.
Are you still working with venomous at all, or are those moved on?
Those have moved on because I felt like my attention went to the turtles, and I am definitely for people enjoying their hobby and just take what you enjoy and what you're fascinated by. It doesn't matter what the price is or where it's from and whatever. But to me, I've been doing this so long, and especially with certain a bit rarer animals that are having a bit of a hard time in their natural range. I feel like me keeping the animal for the sake of keeping the animal is not enough. And a lot of the venomous snakes I kept, although I really enjoyed them, and one day I will have Manchans for sure. But for me, I felt like, okay, for now, I just want to focus on these turtles because there's something I want to build, and my attention and time needs to be in that project.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think it is really interesting, kind of the point that you're highlighting that Flo had mentioned. And I think it's because what you are trying to do at the end of the day is replicating nature, which is a bottomless endeavor forever. Like you just cannot, I guess that's sort of redundant. It's a bottomless endeavor. You cannot get to the bottom of it. And there's always going to be some other aspect that you can change or add or even remove depending on what you're trying to do. And it seems to me that will be like a pretty important theme of what you guys are going to do, and just highlighting almost like the art side of this. And in many ways, like one of the other aspects of the American side, and I hope this doesn't come off as like slamming American keepers, because like some of my favorite keepers are American, but one of the things that is dangerous on this side is there's very little room for experimentation. Like if you don't follow the exact rule of some other Facebook group template, you get like lit on fire for it, and it's just this whole thing where I feel like there's more flexibility in Europe. Maybe there's that privacy aspect because people aren't in front of the camera, so they don't feel like they have to do like toe exactly the line because they're afraid that their reputation is going to be damaged. I don't exactly know. Maybe this is my own thing, but I'm curious if you guys feel that way as well. Like it does really feel like that there's less room for experimentation on our side because we're kind of afraid about what people are going to think.
I think the US hobby is also more like into the social media stuff on Facebook group.
Right.
For example, I'm in Facebook groups, but I'm not participating because, to be honest, I don't really care what the people say because I want to experience it myself. When I try stuff out and see the animals likes it, I don't care if 100 people say it doesn't work. It's like my animal proof that it's working. And I think it's also important that you just try stuff out. I tried so much out. Some people maybe think it's crazy, but like otherwise you can't learn from it. And I never like heard from Facebook groups or listened to Facebook groups, to be honest. And I think it's more of the older generation that is in Facebook groups. And that's what I notice. So
I think to the topic of Facebook groups, Till also has a little bit of a story to add because all of us, we came together because of a strong love for plants at the end of the day. And I feel like we share this idea of removing the aspect of collecting animals inside of the hobby, but much rather building a bioactive habitat and then collecting plants. And for kind of all of us, it grew into a little bit of an addiction at a certain point, because you don't really have to feel so bad about collecting plants and, trying your best with them. And hopefully you are successful. And even if you're not, then it's okay. Still not great, but it's a plant. And if that happens with animals, that's just not acceptable. But so we have a strong passion for plants. And Till, for example, is like-minded like us, sometimes how do you say, contrary thinker, because he believes that things are true that the general public doesn't believe. And for him, for example, it's the plants and the snakes, right? Maybe you can give us a little bit of a story about that.
I just thought you want to put me like in the corner of being some crazy person.
Oh, no. It's good. Maybe that's
it sounded
that's
like
I want to add one more thing, just another sentence. And maybe us as a group of contrary thinkers. Is it actually a word, Dylan? Can you say that?
I think it sounds like.
No,
sorry,
I just had the word. It's not contrarian.
Contrarian thinkers.
Yeah, not contrary. Contrarian.
Or whatever. Okay, I hope everybody out there understands what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
think we are a group of guys who just like to think differently, and inside of this group we influence ourselves or each other pretty heavily, and push ourselves to reach new, levels. And Till, for example, he showed that it is actually really possible to have amazing setups and big snakes, something that you don't really see anywhere around the world elsewhere, I feel like, right?
Yeah, I first thought you were talking about conspiracy theories. I'm not into that, for everyone who's listening. Yeah, I think what you meant was I was getting into like indigo snakes, Trimarchon, and there is very, very few information about these species here in Europe and in Germany, and no books at all, not a lot of content. Not a lot of people wanted to share information, but there are some, very active groups on Facebook, mostly with people from overseas. And when I got into these species, I asked a lot of questions regarding natural style of keeping them together with plants, and people were like very defensive. No, this won't gonna happen. This won't work out and stuff. And I just had to try it out, and it worked very well with my Dramacon corais, the yellowtail. Rest in peace. He lived for a long time in a very dense planted jungle-like enclosure, and it went very well. You had to get more into the plants. You have to check what are the requirements the plants need, what plants come from that region, what lighting do I use, what humidity, you name it. And it worked pretty well. Of course, a 2-meter snake will destroy some plants every now and then. You have to experiment with that. But you will figure out what are the main areas in the enclosure where the snake will crawl and lie. And it did work out, yeah. And I think the whole point is, with things like that, you won't harm the animal if you put too much plants in the enclosure. So maybe just try it out and don't listen to the people saying that's impossible.
Yeah. Well, and if you were trying to get popular on YouTube, you may have not done that because you would have been afraid of what people would have said, and maybe you got dislikes and commented on the video, and then you would have felt bad about yourself and think that you can't do this. And that's sort of like the premise that I think is like very obvious on our side. Ben?
Yeah, something that I'm also very, what all of us are really promoting is first learning how to keep the plants that are native to your favorite animal species habitat. And once you can figure out how to recreate a habitat, including the plants, and they are thriving, then you're ready to add the animal, And for me personally, for example, if I think about a possible next terrarium project that I would like to build for myself, I would definitely first get everything in order with plants native to the habitat. And once you are sure that that's running well, then you can also be a lot more confident that the animal itself will be thriving in the habitat too. Because plant keeping is a different challenge, and it is one that a lot of reptile people should or hopefully will get into more. Mm-hmm. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think it'll be absolutely. I think your podcast will be a very good starting platform for people who want to do biotopes and things that are a lot more popular on the aquarium side, right? Where you're trying to really replicate that tiny piece, like that ecological niche in the native like rainforest or wherever the animal's from. Where many of us don't do that because we kind of have to work backwards because we already have the animals and we already have plants in there, or whatever. So yeah, I think that is fascinating. Does anyone have anything else to add to that? No.
Flo, tell me about. Sorry.
I think I agree with you, Dylan, that because we are a bit more private, we can just tinker away.
Yeah.
And we do our things, and we do. And if you don't really post it, there's nobody saying something of it. And that's also what I noticed with my videos, is people are very private, and 90% of the people that I'm like, man, that person is really doing something cool. They're always like, no, because I need to finish this. Oh, and that is not perfect. And I would like to, and I totally recognize it. I have it exactly the same. But I think that's just an example of almost how serious it is taken. I think it's a pretty serious for us. We enjoy it. We take a lot of fun out of it. But we also take this very seriously.
True,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Flo, I would like to hear you speak about the habitat that you care for.
Yeah. At the moment, I don't have it anymore.
But come on. You know what I mean. The country and everything.
What do you want? Yeah, okay, but like it's like a huge topic to dive in. I don't know if it's like...
Yeah, okay. I was thinking maybe just as a little pitch for the people who don't know you yet.
Yeah, you can give us the
because intro. I think it's very abstract. Cool what you are doing.
Okay, like I have at the moment, so I don't have it anymore. I had like a big enclosure for Enyalioides laticeps. These are, I think the common name, at least in English, is like Amazon broad-headed lizard, but I think there's not a real, there's only like a scientific name. And yeah, they come from Ecuador and Peru, and basically want to build like a piece of the Ecuadorian rainforest. And yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I think it's my main motivation for me is like recreating a habitat and not just keeping the animal. For me, it's much more important that the enclosure looks like nature and not what's in it. And that was like, I talked with with Ryan, with a buddy of mine. I talked with him on this weekend that since I kept animals, I always set them up like naturalistic. I went outside, collected sticks, sand, and leaf litter and stuff like that, and even bugs, isopods. And I did it like naturally because I love the look of a naturalistic enclosure. And for me, it was like, didn't even come into my mind to have like only a glass box with one stick, a plastic hide box. That is not what I'm here for. I want to recreate something that's nature and not just showcase an animal. That way I can also like get a photo of one and hang it on my wall. And yeah, that's at least not that's not what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's much more about the entire project. And I think that's just a preference thing. Some people aren't really about the entire project, but many people are, including myself. That was like a very big thing. Getting into reptile keeping, and even when I kept fish, was the same sort of thing. It wasn't just the fish, it was the entire experience of replicating something, and that's what we enjoy. Well, this is a fascinating, I think anybody listening to this can tell that you are all fascinating individuals, and I cannot wait to see how this progresses into the future. I know that you will add a lot of value to herpetoculture. Is there anything that we didn't say today that you guys want to say before we officially wrap up?
Follow us on Instagram.
Yeah. Definitely the Instagram. Yeah. I'll make sure all the links and everything are in there. We'll make sure people go follow the show. I mean, the people will absolutely be listening. And I think at the time of listening to this for the listeners, there will already be at least 2 episodes published, I believe. Is that right, Stefan?
Yes, we will have an introduction episode just explaining the idea of the podcast and the premises and what our goals are. And then the first episode with Till will be up so people can know Till. Then Flo and Ben will follow, maybe me, and then our first guests are going to be on. So we are really looking forward. And I think we have given a good example, and we are all learning. So I'm really looking forward to the whole process also of doing this and getting better at it. I think it's only gonna be really cool. I'm really looking forward.
Yeah, and it's gonna be on YouTube as well, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be on YouTube, Spotify, and maybe some other connected services.
Yeah, we'll make sure it gets on Apple and all that. I'll
so
help you with that if you need.
That will be lovely, and I hope a lot of people will watch on YouTube and become members, because then we can get a better webcam for Till.
That's right.
Thank you so much for the financial support.
Of course.
Ben, did you have something to add to that?
I would like to ask you, Dylan, if you had to break it down to one advice, what would you tell us to, be as successful as possible with a project?
I think the best answer to that is be curious, which kind of sounds maybe like a bit cliched, but the more curious you can remain in when you're recording an episode, or even just setting up episodes, finding guests, the better. Because it's a challenge when you first start, because you're worried about like dead air, or like it's not a radio show, so it doesn't matter if there's dead air, but it can be like a panic at first, because you're trying to, like, as you ask a question, the guest starts answering, and now you're like thinking of the next question, because you're so afraid that once he is done. But instead, being as curious as possible and really like deeply listening to what the person is saying, because that is what the listener is doing. So the best episodes you will ever record are when the next question that comes out of your mouth is what the listener was thinking. Mm-hmm. So if the listener's thinking, I wonder what he does about this, and then you ask that question, you have absolutely nailed an interview. And the only way to do that is by actually engaging and listening to the guest and being curious. So I think that's probably the best piece of advice I can give you guys.
All right.
Dylan, when do you consider an episode of your podcast as successful, or when do you say this was a good episode?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I mean, YouTube is very fickle. So some episodes that I think are amazing just don't go anywhere on YouTube. Maybe I titled them wrong, or I didn't do a great thumbnail. So it's like not a good barometer of how it is. For me, it's how I feel after. And you'll know, like, when you record a great episode, you'll have energy afterwards. And that's one of the reasons I don't like recording late at night, because if I record a great episode, I don't sleep, because I'm just like so buzzed off of having a great conversation. And sometimes those conversations won't get enough listeners for you to feel like it should, but it doesn't matter. It's more about the like in the moment feeling that I get. That's how I gauge it.
That's so interesting. That's also for us, I think, a bit of person to do this podcast, because of course we've been listening to your podcast and the Project Herpetoculture, and when there's like a good episode, you get stuck in it, and I have typed so many YouTube comments. I went from Spotify to YouTube to write a comment, and halfway I just gave up, because it was, like this epistle. I was like, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah,
I wanna be part of this. So I love those episodes, and you can definitely feel when you have those. Can I ask, maybe as a last question, what is the best question you have ever asked for your, when you were in the mode and you were asking that question, and the result, you were like, oh my God, this is...
Oh my gosh. I don't even know. I would have to just think. I mean, there's been so many times where like an episode that I just recorded with Luke Belsuto, who is a tortoise biologist in California, and we were just kind of wrapping up the episode, and I asked him, because his father I knew had grown up, he kind of mentioned earlier in the episode, was like he grew up in an inner city, like in East LA, in gangs and prisons, but he also kind of mentioned later on that his dad was like leading this conservation effort, and so I kind of like stopped and said, how did that happen? It doesn't make any sense. So we sort of stopped the conversation to ask him how much of a crazy story that is. And then he just told this amazing story about this experience that his dad had in the desert like 25 years earlier with this tortoise. And it really like was an emotional story for me. So that's just like, recency bias. I just had that conversation a couple weeks ago, but it's questions like that will like totally catch you off guard, where you're thinking, maybe I should just follow up on that. And usually when you do, it unfolds this crazy thing. So it can be uncomfortable at first asking people like deeper questions, but normally those are the type of questions that will yield the best answers.
Amazing.
Yeah, I get it. Cool. Very cool. Exciting.
Awesome. Well, I cannot wait to be a listener. I will be a listener of the podcast for sure. I'm very excited for this to get dropped. Let's quickly go around, because I want to make sure that your own Instagram pages are promoted here as well. And then maybe when we get to you, Stefan, you can make sure everybody knows everything about the podcast. But why don't we start with Till? Let us know where we can find you on Instagram or anywhere else.
Oh, Yeah, that's complicated because I recently changed my Instagram handle. It was Till's Reptile Room, but now it's Till Lansodie. I hope I said that correctly. It's like the genus name for Tillandsia species, but my first name is Till, so it's TIL dot and then the rest of the name. Maybe it's easier to write that down.
Yeah, I'll make sure it's in the show notes. Yeah, because I noticed when you guys did the last episode with Project Herpetoculture, when I was doing the show notes, I'm like, hey, this is different. And then I think Roy had actually, sorry, Roy, for listening to this. There was like a typo in the Latin name. And I'm like, where? He's just, this Instagram page doesn't exist anymore. But I did find it. So I'll make sure it's in the, it's in the notes for people.
Thank you.
And Flo, where can we find you?
Also on Instagram, de.reptiles. I'm only active there, so...
Awesome.
Yes.
And Ben?
Yeah, for me it is Unseen Diversity. The name because up to this point I didn't show my face, and now I'm finally public. Well, it's what it is. I hope it's all right for everybody.
What a face.
And and the diversity because you will get to see animals that you have not seen before. And yeah.
Awesome. Is there? I know the Greenhouse Boys was kind of like a little thing, but is there an Instagram page or anything for that? I forget.
To be honest, we don't really care about it, right? We had an Instagram
it's kind
page,
of a joke.
but at the end of the day, we just do our own stuff.
I think we can't even get into it, right? We
can. We have access. I have access, but we just don't care about it at the end. Well, we could, but just follow us individually. And for Stefan, it's a Terrarium channel. Yeah, I guess most of the listeners maybe know his face already. Yeah.
Yes. And Stefan, do you want to tell us the podcast name again, and then any other place they can find it online?
Yeah, so the podcast name is European Herpetoculture Podcast. If I'm saying that correctly, Flo, because Flo is our
social media manager.
So yes, he's the guy.
Perfect.
Perfect. European Herpetoculture Podcast on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube, and that's gonna be our main ways of communicating with our audience, with the people, and so please go there.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the plunge and doing the podcast and also being on this show today to talk about it. I can't wait to see how this thing evolves. So it was a pleasure chatting with all of you today. And of course, we'll chat again in the future.
Thank you very much, Dylan.
That would be great.
Thank you so much.
All right, that is the end of that episode. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Ben, Flo, Till, and Stefan, I'm super excited for the project that you're working on. I can't wait to go out and listen to them. Of course, the episodes are already live. I think there's 2 episodes. As of me recording this right now, they're not live. I'm in the past, so I haven't had a chance to listen to them yet, but hopefully I do soon, and I'm very much looking forward to watching that project develop. Listeners, please let us know what you thought. I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts are on American versus European keeping. I hope it didn't come off as bashing American keeping. I mean, I consider myself as an American keeper, even though I'm Canadian. We're obviously very heavily influenced on the American side. And I think the differences between the two cultures from across the ocean are fascinating. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as well as a listener. You can do that on YouTube or on Spotify. Both options have video as well as comments. Or find one of the posts on social media. Normally I make a couple Instagram posts or Facebook. Please, you can share your thoughts there. If you would like to support the podcast, you can do that at patreon.com/animalsathome. If you do become a member, you are automatically added to the Discord server and you can have conversations with like-minded keepers. And of course, you have early access, ad-free access to the episodes of the podcast, and you get to communicate with me directly. And there's other benefits as well on those, depending on which tier you're involved in. So you can check that out. You can also check out Custom Reptile Habitats, which is an affiliate sponsor. You can find the link in both the show notes or the YouTube description. If you do make a purchase, a commission comes back to me at no extra cost to you. And I think that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I can't wait for the European Herpetoculture Podcast to get officially launched. I will be listening to it on my next drive to work, and I hope you are as well. I will catch you in the next episode.